So we're reviewing that precept, the precept around speech. And and maybe we have emphasized this more, this aspect of speech, which is speaking to ourselves, the way we speak to ourselves. That's not so much traditionally emphasized, right? And classically, there's a sense that, of course, we're going to talk nicely to ourselves, right? If we're born into a sense of fundamental goodness and have a sense that we already belong here and don't have to earn our right to be here, which is the Eastern way of approaching this, maybe we do talk to ourselves more nicely. I'm not sure. What I know is that we don't, right? And that becomes a pretty big issue for most of us in practice, the way we speak to ourselves, in a not so pleasant, not so upbeat, not so affirmative manner. Yeah. So I want to just second that in terms of following up on Susan's wonderful talk on Monday. And I thought I would share a story, which, and you may have heard a part of this story somewhere along the way. You may have heard it. Some stories are worth repeating. Everything in the Dharma is worth repeating, isn't it? So much of it is about repetition. But this is a story that's been very moving to us. We happen to be very present to it as well, the unfolding of it. So I'm going to tell you a story. Okay? Once upon a time, we taught at Esalen in California. Have any of you been to Esalen? Any of you? Yeah, it's still out there. It's still going to be out there until the mudslides on Highway 1, I think, finally take it completely out of commission. It's a big deal out there in that area of California, the mudslides. That's a beautiful place, and a New Age place. It was really big back in the 60s. It was a gestalt place. It still is primarily a gestalt place. The home of Fritz Perls is still out there. Anybody remember Fritz Perls? Yeah, Fritz Perls, the gestalt guy. I used to do some gestalt work. He had a couple quotes that are very relevant to meditation, like, boredom is simply lack of interest. Yeah. Anyway, that's not who I'm going to talk about this morning. There was a gestalt therapist out there who we met her. Her name is Mariah Gladys Fenton. She's a gestalt therapist. And she changed gestalt therapy in her work, and I'll tell you how and why in a moment. But long ago, it's probably about 30 years ago now, 35 years ago now, maybe, she was diagnosed with a variant of ALS as a relatively young woman in her 30s. She was diagnosed with ALS. At the time, they didn't know what the course of it. The usual course of it is get your affairs in order. You'll have, maybe a year, maybe a year and a half, maybe a little bit longer. It does take a different pathway. So part of the story is this: the man that she was dating at that time, or she was in relationship with at that time, the day he heard about the diagnosis, the day she received that diagnosis, proposed to her, and they got married. That's the first part of the story. The second part of the story is that when you have a diagnosis like ALS, you're not expected to even think about getting pregnant. But she got pregnant and had a child, and found out that she has, I guess, a relatively rare form of ALS, which is has a much longer cycle. It still leads to a gradual breakdown the neurological system and so forth, but over a much longer period of time. And so gradually, she began to lose, more of her faculties. When we met her, at Esalen, she was in a wheelchair. She couldn't walk at this point, and apparently she did psychotherapy. She continued to do gestalt psychotherapy, and we saw a couple of examples of this. I'll tell you how with a translator. She had to have a translator there because she could only whisper. She started to affect her vocal cords. But she continued to work with people. Now, what we saw, one of them, we would teach out there for a month at a time. What we saw is they had a big tent down there, and they have these surprise events there at Esalen. It's really like a place like no other. Every kind of global new age and work, growth-oriented path is supported out there, not just meditation, not primarily meditation. You meet a lot of really interesting and globally interested people. But there was a big event in the big tent down there. Come down to the big event in the big tent. And this is what we saw. We saw that her son, who was now in his 20s, the son who she had a year after she was diagnosed with ALS, is now in his 20s, was a videographer, and he'd done a documentary about his mother, which he was about to show for the first time to all of us, but also to his mother, who was there in the audience with her partner. So the three of them were there, the son, the mother, and the partner, showing this documentary which he had made about his mother and about her work, her life and her work, to all of us. And to this day, it was, I want to say that the most, powerful, moving presentation that I'd been party to, that I'd been present to. Just seeing the documentary would be moving, right? Anywhere. Just seeing the documentary would be moving. And then we were there at the time with those people. She died a couple of years ago, by the way. This was, 6 or 7 years ago. Yeah. And one of the things that she said, she said, because she speaks, we hear her speak in the documentary. And there are a couple things that stand out about speaking to yourself. This is the point of the story, and it's relevant to all of us. She said two things that I'll never forget, we'll never forget. One was, after the day she got diagnosed, she came home and she said that she made a determination that from that day, for as long as she shall live, which she didn't expect to be very long, she would walk and be on this earth as if she were already loved. And the second thing she said, and apparently she would say this to some of her clients as well, If you were to whisper everything that you said to yourself today into my ear, Would I have had a good day? In other words, she was so aware of how we all speak to ourselves. And isn't that one of the most important things for us to be attending to in our day-to-day practice? Yeah, not just sitting on the cushion practice, but the way we speak to ourselves. And of course, that's what Susan was highlighting so beautifully on Monday. That needs to be, of all of the moments, there's all this, we give you offer a lot of serving suggestions about this and that, but of all of the moments to pay attention to in daily life, one of the important ones is to begin to notice when we are not speaking kindly to ourselves. Because as Susan will remind us, if you don't notice it, you can't change it. If you don't notice it and you're doing that, you are reinforcing it again, 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 as we've been doing for our whole lives. There it is again. I'm saying it. If I'm not aware of it, I'm believing it in that moment. There I am. I'm an asshole again. I say it to myself again. I believe it again. If I'm not mindful of it, I believe it again and I reinforce it again. The most important thing we can do internally in this space is to begin to stop reinforcing the not enough messages that we send ourselves. Not get rid of them. Stop reinforcing them. Stop believing them. And that part of us that will go, wait a second, I see that. Wow, I'm not signing up for that. I see that and I'm still a good person. I see that. However you can disrupt that moment, see that moment and not reinforce it. To me, that is one of the most important dimensions of speech, of the precept of speech. Yeah? Yeah. So I know we'll be moving on from that. We're just touching into this precept briefly again as a review. But for us, that's one of the points that we want you to take forward into your lives. Yeah, 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 yeah. It's so pivotal. It's so pivotal. Yeah. So please, let's all do that together. Let's stop reinforcing the not good enough messages that we send ourselves. Okay? Yeah, yeah. All beings will benefit if we do that, and certainly we will. Yeah.